Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's the day before Thanksgiving in the U.S., and this is Aragon Live. With me is Ken Delaney, Betsy Burton, Adam Pease, and yours truly, Jim Lundy. So we're going to dive right into some of the tech news coming off the heels of Microsoft's event that we blogged on and we talked about last week. Amazon's in the news. Adam, why don't you talk about the $4 billion investment in Anthropic?
Yeah, so Amazon has invested once again in Anthropic, which is, for those who don't know, a leading AI model provider. They've invested $4 billion this time after about $2.5 billion in March. And so, major investments. Anthropic is definitely, I think, basically neck and neck with OpenAI, at least as far as capabilities and quality are concerned. Maybe not so much in terms of users, but I think their users do seem to be growing a lot. And they're releasing a lot of interesting stuff. And so, definitely everyone wants to see what their next model is, the next version of Claude. I've used both Claude and ChatGPT. I don't know if you guys have used Claude at all, but it's interesting. It definitely has a bit of a different flavor to the experience than other AIs do. And yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with all the money.
Does it support the same sort of private sections that you can have with some of the other AI engines?
What do you mean private exactly?
Where you can have everything within your company's area and just have it learn by itself.
There's an enterprise plan. I'm not exactly sure to what extent. I mean, I'm sure it has things like opting out of data training, having your training data interpreted by the model. That's probably on by default at this point. But I know that their integrations and sort of enterprise suite is expanding. They just released like Google Docs integration, for example. And so they're definitely trying to deliver something that, can slot into the business. But I don't think they're quite maybe at the level that ChatGPT is at or Gemini is at.
Or Gemini, yeah.
But Adam, is there a super AI query app now where you ask once and it sends it to the four major models?
No, there is not.
Not that I know of. No.
Sounds like
I think the bigger story on Anthropic, and I'm doing a blog on this, is that Amazon wants basically AWS to be the primary processing point for Anthropic using the AWS GPUs. So they're trying to say that they get first mover advantage with Anthropic. Now realize that previously in March they did a $2.5 billion investment, but part of that investment was that Anthropic would use AWS services. So it's not necessarily clear that it was a straight investment. They counted it as investment, but Anthropic is using AWS, and which, by the way, is not cheap. So the question is, how exclusive will the Anthropic thing be for Amazon? Will that get Bedrock back in front and center conversations? Because right now, Bedrock is not part of the mainstream conversations about co-pilots and assistants.
And didn't we say last week that Palantir was going to use Anthropic?
That's one of them they're using.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things we're telling clients is you need to ask who they're using. And, for example, how are you guaranteeing that the data stays in your tenant? To Betsy's point, that's basically the trust layer for these applications, so that it's only using your data in your tenant, which is something Google and Microsoft guarantee you. OpenAI does not guarantee that, but they're saying that they do it. And speaking of which, Salesforce. So there's a lot of hype around Agentforce that they announced in September, which is their new AI platform for agents. And one of the areas that they're getting a lot of hype around, and there's a lot of new startups that were around before, but now the startups are getting into it because of this task-oriented SDR. So it's an agent that basically will reach out and try to get appointments with you, handle objections, and still try to close for an appointment. So Salesforce is trying to get people to sign up and do it, but you got to upgrade your platform. And let's just say their sales reps maybe aren't giving you the cleanest proposals. Like, oh, if you sign up for this right now, you get a credit against what you already spent. They did that to us, and we're like, well, show us the credit, and they wouldn't show it to us. I mean, I know what it is, but I'm not, until I see it in a proposal, I'm not going to sign anything. And there's still a lot of work to get Salesforce, configured to use and to build an agent, right? There's a lot of stuff you have to do to make it like ready to use. So they're trying, but they're also behind compared to Google and Microsoft in getting customers to use stuff. But there's a lot of hype. See, they're the only ones really pushing the AI SDR. Microsoft's not pushing that.
Yeah.
Google's not in that area. They're doing agents for contact center, but Salesforce is pushing around, the sales angle, and I think they're going to get a lot of traction.
It's funny, Jim, because it feels like Salesforce was really hot early on with Einstein and going and getting that out to customers. And there was a little bit of a slowdown while we saw a lot more movement from Microsoft and Google and Amazon. Is that perception right, you think? I mean,
they had an early lead with Einstein. They blew it,
mhm.
and it's not the same.
It's not the same. And yeah, and I don't know that they'll ever be on the same playing field as the other vendors in terms of, Google, Microsoft, and
Well, remember, they're doing sales and service.
right,
So,
exactly.
and marketing. So I would say that they're doing areas where that's not an area that Google, even though they have the number one marketing analytics platform, and Dynamics 365 is not setting the world on fire. So
Right.
I do think in their patch, which is sales and service, I think they will do fine.
Yeah, right, exactly. Interesting.
But are people going to use Agentforce to build all these new agents? I think they're going to use Google or Microsoft before they use Salesforce.
Yeah.
So we'll see. They'll
Okay.
get their share. Okay, so I'm going to start this off. So it's in the Wall Street Journal today, 7.9 billion, round up to 8, that Intel is getting from the CHIPS Act to build their U.S. plants. We were doing the prep call, and I kind of called it a bailout. There's some concerns around, where Intel is, and they can't do stock buybacks for the next 5 years. So they can't use that cash to, pump their stock up.
Oh, yeah.
Ken, you were covering this pretty closely. What's your
Yeah,
take?
the good news is that there's some milestones. I don't know exactly what they are, but they've put milestones in here because, there's a big concern about Intel being a sort of a nostalgia play. We want to move more, chip manufacturing onshore. Intel's always been the hallmark for chip manufacturing in the U.S. So they clearly they're going to put some money in here. But I was lead analyst for Intel for 3 years when I was at Gartner, and I spent many years before them tracking Intel because they were the foundation of the PC market that I tracked. And the attitude over at Intel was always, we can do this, we can do this. We don't need any input, we can do this. So on one hand, it was positive. On the other hand, they didn't want output from the other side. You have to realize that they're up a tremendously good competitor in TSMC, who's currently at 3 nanometer process. So somebody at Intel has got to go above that level to really put us back in the forefront of semiconductor manufacturing. And I don't know whether that pressure is there internally to do that. Because if they wind up with, just what everybody else has, while others are more advanced, Samsung, TSMC, other chip manufacturers, that would be a waste of money for the United States. So somebody, let's hope Gelsinger kind of does what Elon Musk did with rocketry, is push them way beyond where they think they can be. And that's what I'm going to watch.
Well, I do think that there's going to be pressure on Intel from Elon. There's going to be pressure.
Let's hope so.
Sora tool, Adam?
Yeah. So Sora, OpenAI's new video model, has leaked onto Hugging Face. Someone with early access, maybe an artist who they had provided it to, leaked an endpoint onto Hugging Face, which makes it possible basically for anyone to use it. It could be shut down by now, but at least last night, and I think early this morning, it was operational. And I think that the overall state of AI video has improved a lot since Sora was announced. And so maybe it's not completely as standout as it was when it was announced in like March or whatever. That being said, it's still definitely impressive tech. And, I think it's probably still leader of the pack in terms of quality, even if others have caught up more. And the only other thing I would add is that people are noticing that it takes less time than was originally predicted to create these videos, which is great news for OpenAI. And so I guess it's just, time will tell whether they pull this down or whether they expand it into, an open source offering or what.
And Adam, these are just videos of like a person, right? They're not
Videos
like
of-
a cartoon creation type thing where you get a full landscape of
They
actors?
could be, they're pretty much videos of anything at this point.
Really?
I've seen some that are cartoon style, all sorts of styles and all sorts of content.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Firefox and Windows exploit is something, it's a Russian hacker group called Romcom, and some of the patches were already made, but it's in the news again because they're not giving up. So that's the importance of keeping browsers and operating systems updated by the providers, but people need to also refresh that. So the whole thing about hacker groups is something that both enterprises and governments need to tackle harder. I mean, this shit needs to stop. It's not going to stop though.
Yeah, these guys are doing ransomware attacks, correct? I guess they went after a Japanese tech company just last week or last month.
Yeah. So they basically, the way they do it, they basically try to get you to go to a fake website, and then they get you.
Okay.
So yeah, by the way, Google's been updating Chrome a lot. And by the way, Apple keeps advertising that their Safari is more secure than Chrome.
Hmm.
Because they have an ad that shows tons of drones spying on you when you open Chrome. So, and then when you open Safari, all those spies go away.
I've seen those ads on TV that they have where the two people are with drones. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep track of that. And over to you about Huawei.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story. So Apple does well in China, but of course they do well because, as Apple's traditionally done, they're kind of a soup to nuts, completely environment. They make sure everything works because it's a very unified environment. Whereas Android is, kind of a little bit, suffers the fallacies of open source. So Huawei decided to go after Apple by coming out with their own Harmony OS, which will be much more Apple-like, where everything's controlled within the platform. They'd like to take share within China for sure of smartphones. So they put this out. It's going to have about 15,000 applications to start with. They're planning 100,000 applications. But whenever you do these new operating systems, you challenge the developers now to be able to build for Android, for modified versions of Android, such as on Samsung. You talk about building for Apple, and now they got to build for Harmony OS. Every time I've seen this happen, where developers have to do so many versions of things, the new OS starts to be stifled to some degree. So we'll see. I mean, they've got a lot of money. I'm sure the Chinese government's behind them doing this. Huawei's probably a little concerned about the fact that they've been blocked on so many tech initiatives in the Western world, kind of keep them out of these markets for fear of Chinese control. But anyways, this new OS is going to be a force of certainly in China, and they're going after Apple with this, and we'll see what happens. Come over to you.
Actually, over to Adam.
Yeah. So this next one is a quick one. Fugato is a new audio model NVIDIA has supposedly finished developing but not released. And yeah, it shows impressive capabilities when it comes to basically generating novel sounds. And so I would say this is, a short one, but it's cool to see NVIDIA getting into this territory too. They're pushing a lot of multimodal models.
So is this originally generated audio, or can it take someone's speech and make it better? The reason I'm asking,
I believe it's all originally generated audio. Yeah.
Okay, because you get on the line with some of these customer service places where they have foreign speakers of English, and it's often hard to hear. If they could clear up that particular thing, it would make customer service a lot more acceptable, because be able to get a talent that we can't really use today.
All right, and then the last one. So there was an outage yesterday on both Outlook and Teams. People reporting down. There were a lot of people on social media making fun of it, but it was widespread. And I mean, outages are becoming kind of a regular thing. I think it's particularly noteworthy that it's a collaboration app where people are trying to use mail and chat, And, Microsoft, it's unclear which data center went out, but it was a significant outage for a couple of hours. And, there's a tool like Down Detector where you can look at that. But, the one thing to be aware is big cloud vendors are under attack all the time. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. And so while people make fun of them, they are doing a lot to protect a lot of enterprises. And sometimes they may have to take something down to protect, a worse attack. So I would just say that, Microsoft's one of the leading providers at stopping ransomware attacks out there. So there are going to be times where they get attacked. And, this was one of those times, I think. So there's, I think, another side of the story. But anyway, they're back online now. So, hey, we're going to wish everybody a great U.S. Thanksgiving. We'll be back next week. We have our big Aragon Transform a virtual event on December 10th, and then our holiday party Transform physical event that many of our clients come to in San Carlos. But we're going to thank everybody. I want to thank Ken, Betsy, and Adam, and hope that everybody watching this has a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you back here next week. Thanks, everybody.